My name is Nicholas Gray and I'm the CEO of The Australian and the General Manager and Publisher of Business Spectator. And I'd like to welcome everyone again to the NBN debate in proud partnership with IBM. And I'd also like to thank and acknowledge the support of the Australian British Chamber of Commerce. This is the third event series on which Business Spectator and IBM have partnered. We've focused in these event series on exploring with government and business leaders how the digital economy is transforming business models before our very eyes. And it's a particularly proud moment for us today, as it's the first business leaders event jointly hosted by The Australian and Business Spectator. My own industry, the media, has been significantly reshaped by the digital economy, although I am pleased to say we are weathering the storm. With a resilient print circulation and over 51,000 digital subscribers, there have never been more people buying The Australian Monday to Friday across print and digital on an unduplicated basis. And we'll be continuing to invest in our brand, our digital product, and closer ties between The Australian and Business Spectator to ensure that that growth continues in 2014 and beyond. Since the Australian Labor Party launched the NBN policy in 2007, there has been an active debate on the merits of the policy, the cost, the quality of the implementation, and the Coalition's policy response, championed since 2010 by the Shadow Communications spokesman and member for Wentworth, Malcolm Turnbull, who's our special guest today. And readers of Business Spectator and Technology Spectator will be very familiar with the debate that has raged in our pages between Alan and Malcolm over the past year. On August the 20th, 2012, Alan wrote, "Sometime between now and the election, the Coalition will need to dump its plan to stop the NBN rollout and replace it with a fibre to the node network." To which Malcolm, in a lively piece, immediately responded, Alan Kohler's column today is pure fantasy. The debate has ensued in the intervening year and triggered our idea of bringing the debate to the stage in front of Australia's business leaders and exploring in depth what the Coalition policy will mean, especially for business and digital business models. And for those in the room who are tweeting, there are a number of hashtags, one of which is hashtag NBN debate, and there are a few others which are laid out on the table in front of you. To introduce the stars of today's show, I'd like to welcome to the stage Andrew Stevens, Managing Director of IBM Australia and New Zealand since January 2011. He has been with IBM for 11 years and has led IBM's global business services in Asia Pacific, been Managing Partner for Growth Markets, responsible for the strategic direction and operational management of IBM's consulting division for 8 growth markets. Alan is a member of the Business Council of Australia. Andrew. Alan is no such thing. Andrew is a member of the Business Council of Australia, the Council of Governors of the American Chamber of Commerce in Australia, and the Business Advisory Council of the Australian School of Business at the University of New South Wales. He is the Director of the National Board of the Australian Information Industry Association and is the Chair of the Australian Government Services Leader Group. He also serves on the board of the Australian Chamber Orchestra and the board of the Greater Western Sydney Giants, who he assures me are going to win on the weekend against the Demons. Please welcome Andrew.
The most exciting project in Australian sport. Thank you very much, Nicholas, for that introduction and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Let me first begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we are having this wonderful lunch, and ahead of this incredible conversation today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. Let me pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and also to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people who are here today. I'm delighted to see so many people here to witness this conversation that was billed as a debate, but will in fact be a conversation about the future of business actually in this country. I'm also excited about the prospect of lifting the NBN debate from the pages of the newspaper and really taken into the real world. And I gather from the fact that we have 260 people here today, you didn't just think this would be an interesting sort of way to fill the calendar on a lovely Thursday afternoon, nor the sparkling entertainment or oratory of Alan Kohler or indeed Malcolm Turnbull, but like many businesses who are really considering their business model and their major capital investment over the next decade, this issue of broadband is front and centre for businesses, and I think that's why we have such an incredible audience. And so let me again thank you for being part of this event. I commend Business Spectator and the Australian for holding these events. I'm delighted this is the first joint Business Spectator and Australian one, and also that there are so many people who have joined us to very soon hear from two men who've each done their part to inform, to develop, to spice up, and to continue and make sustain this debate about the role that broadband will play in our nation's competitiveness, productivity and business environment. Alan Kohler has experience from the coalface, having built Business Spectator, and in fact, as I said to Alan, it was born digital and he understands exactly what's involved, the challenges and the opportunities there. Not only Business Spectator, but the Eureka report, which in its own right has also helped to transform the stockbroking industry, the advisory business. And as we said, Alan, it's amazing as you change the delivery and the operations and delivery mechanism, you also bring into focus the actual value proposition of the product or the service that you provide, and you have first-hand knowledge of that. Secondly, running a successful business is something that Malcolm Turnbull also understands, and understands to his core. As the Shadow Minister for Communications and Broadband, Malcolm is at the pointy end of setting opposition policy that will influence our prosperity for years to come. And given the way the opinion polls are looking, then again, I think in making those 10-year decisions, I think there's people here saying if Malcolm is part of a new government at whatever date there is an election, then we better hear firsthand from him what implications that will have for our business model, and in fact our offer and our way of delivering our products and services to our clients. Malcolm's spoken eloquently and with conviction about his vision for broadband in this nation, and I expect we'll hear, and certainly hope that we'll hear more about that today. Indeed, leading up to 2025, the digital economy will become the economy. It's already filtering into every aspect of our businesses. Already people are more connected through social media such as LinkedIn and Facebook. Consumers and citizens are transacting with each other, and this is putting them in a position of unprecedented power. People are more knowledgeable, opinionated and demanding. We especially see this with the millennials who are making their presence felt in the economy, and we know that the internet generation born after the mid-90s is now outnumbering the baby boomers in the economy, and we're going to see that with the millennials coming through. This is going to accelerate, and it's going to be something that is going to be, I think, the deciding factor at the competitive frontier between leader and laggard in most every industry and every corner of our economy. This means that business has to become more transparent, more responsive and more effective. To do that, they must share information faster, smarter and lead them to flatten out their organisation structures. Already we're seeing businesses augment and replace decision-making based on gut feel and relying on wisdom gleaned from big data. The spread of big data technologies, analytics software coupled to massive databases is breeding a new style of informed intuition. This is an exciting time to be running a business, and that's a euphemism. It's a challenging time also to running a business or a government agency in Australia. If we get this digital transformation right, it will power Australia for generations to come. Last year, IBM research showed that ubiquitous broadband, fast broadband, will be instrumental in fueling productivity and prosperity for the nation. And to illustrate, we forecast that the broadband-powered industry will generate $1 trillion in revenue by 2050, and that's 8 times the $131 billion that it's generating in today's economy. But this, as we hope to hear today, is not actually about pits and pipes. What matters is the applications that ride over the network and the benefits that they bring. It's the business models that you and we will all develop, implement, to make sure our businesses are being responsive to those customers, those consumers, those citizens, and also those increasingly demanding and informed employees that bring their skills to work every single day in our business. Right now we're doing further work and further research that we'll be releasing shortly to where this digital transformation is not taking the economy, but is taking the enterprise. Next week, we'll release our latest study into the digital economy called Reinventing Australian Enterprises for the Digital Economy. This new report will look at how the digital revolution will unfold for individual companies, agencies, individual enterprises. There will be, and having seen the findings, there will be a sharp divergence between those enterprises that embrace broadband and transform their operations for the digital age and those that do not. It also shows that after a certain point, it will be very hard for a follower business to catch the leaders that do get digital right. Most importantly, our modelling shows that many sectors are rapidly approaching a key decision point. In fact, the go, no-go point. Media, music, retail are not the only sectors that have been reinvented by digital. Soon every sector will, your business will, if not already. The attendance of every one of us here today signals our shared intention to participate in the sort of fundamental economic shift that arises only once a generation or so. At IBM, we believe broadband will have an impact, a big impact on the economy, and as big, quite frankly, as the implementation and rollout of the PC that's already had its impact, this will be bigger. Looking down the road, we don't want to be in a position of wishing we'd started the nation's digital transformation years earlier, like many businesses are in that position today. I hope that this helps set the stage for what I think will be a wonderful and a fascinating conversation, not about bits and bytes, but about business models, the future, and where we get to as a nation. It's a debate, it's a discussion about the very future of our nation and every business and person in it. So with that, let me invite both Malcolm and Alan to the stage to get this conversation underway. Thank you very much. Thanks very much. Good. Very good.
Thanks, Andrew. Welcome, everyone. Thanks, Malcolm.
It's a very comfortable chair, this I could.
Yeah, we'll just sit back and relax. Okay, there's a few things I want to say to start with. Firstly, I think it's great that Malcolm's come today. Thank you for doing that. Subjecting yourself
to... I'm normally shy and retiring.
That's right. Now, Andrew called it a conversation. Nicholas called it a debate. It's probably going to be somewhere in between. I don't want to get accused of misleading and deceptive conduct. However, I'm not the stand-in for the Minister, Anthony Albanese, sitting here, you know, debating in a political sense with the Shadow Minister. And there's been an incredible amount of Twitter conversation ahead of this. A lot of people have, you know, been suggesting questions. You know, an unbelievable number of questions have been suggested to me. I just wanted to say, a lot of that stuff is technical. I don't want to spend today with technical discussions. I think that Andrew's right. It needs to be a big picture, the business models, a policy, and so on. And the final thing I wanted to say is that the last, Nicholas didn't quote this, but the last thing I wrote on the subject, I think, was to congratulate and acknowledge the fact that Malcolm has brought the Coalition's policy on NBN a long way. When he took over the portfolio, the policy was to abolish the NBN. It had been stated by a number of frontbenchers, including the opposition leader. And now the policy of the Coalition is to have the NBN in a different form. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. That's been a fantastic effort by Malcolm to do that, I think. And most people in this room would agree, I'm sure.
I think you should take all the credit for it, actually.
Thank you. Well, I'll be happy to do that, actually.
I wanted to get this off on the right start, you know. Sort of, you know.
You're such a suck, Malcolm.
Oh, absolutely. You know, they say, you know, the flatterer is seldom interrupted. And as far as flattery goes, with royalty, you should lay it on with a trowel. I think with journalists you're about to interview, you should lay it on with a backhoe.
Well, I can assure you it'll do you no good whatsoever, Malcolm. Okay, so the first thing...
Far away.
Okay, so the first thing is, I just want to get on the record.
Yeah.
You may have said this already, I can't remember.
Yeah.
When if you win the election, you take over as Minister, what exactly will happen to NBN Co? Will it be put into suspended animation while you conduct your studies and reviews that you propose? Because there's a lot of companies that actually are relying on the NBN business, and we've seen Macmillan Shakespeare collapse its share price because of what happened with FPT, and I'm wondering, and a lot of companies I'm sure are concerned that might happen as a result of what you do.
Well, there are a lot of companies relying on the NBN at the moment, and regrettably some of them are insolvency practitioners who are trying to help out the contractors and subcontractors who have been losing so much money doing the work. As we've stated in our policy, we're going to accelerate the rollout of the NBN. The idea is to complete the project sooner. We will honour existing contracts where there will be a shift in the mix in the fixed line area from being all fibre to the premise, albeit being built at an incredibly slow rate, and we all know how far they've missed their targets and so forth, to a mix where most of the brownfield areas will be fibre to the node. That's our expectation, but we'll justify that in a manner I'll come to in a minute. And about 20%, so well over 2 million premises, will be fibre to the premise. So there's still going to be a lot of fibre to the premise, and if we can justify doing more cost effectively, we will. One of the critical things to bear in mind is that the most important thing we're going to do from the jump is undertake a very rigorous analysis of what this project is really going to cost in dollars and years to complete on the current specifications. And then an equally rigorous analysis of what are the genuine savings, not in an idealised way, but in an actual realisable way, the genuine savings that can be achieved in dollars and years by making certain modifications, including those we've canvassed in the policy. And that, which we've called the strategic review in our policy, is the single most important piece of work in the first 100 days.
Well, how long will that take?
Our aim is to get it done in 60 days. I would expect that there's a fair bit of preliminary work being done both in the department and NBN Co, because government departments always do anticipate the possibility of a change of government. So, I think if we win the election, we won't be presented with a blank sheet of paper. There'll be a fair bit of work done already. But it's very, very critical because, as you know, we think the NBN Co's business plan dramatically undercooks the cost of construction and the time taken to complete it, among other things.
Well, just on that subject, you've roundly criticised the government for not having done a cost-benefit analysis from the beginning, but aren't you really guilty of the same sin in reverse, which is to say that you're making all these assertions about the NBN and their NBN and what it is going to be and so on, without there being a cost-benefit analysis? You're actually preempting the work that you say is required.
No,
with your assertions.
No, we most certainly are not. We have set out what we expect an NBN Co configured in a more rational manner will look like. But as I've said, if we can do more fibre than we've anticipated, that wouldn't be a bad thing. There are other technologies that we have not canvassed in here, variants on fibre to the node. As you know, we've assumed you would deliver in most of the brownfield areas broadband, taking advantage of the last, X hundred metres of copper using a technology called vectored VDSL, which is very high bit rate DSL with the vectoring technology that is a noise cancellation technique. But there is an even more souped up version of that called G.fast, which is now starting to be deployed commercially for the first time, which over short copper runs, by which I mean say 100 metres, can deliver over 1 gig. Now, this is actually let me give you a high level appreciation of what's happened. For a long time, say for the last 5 or 6 years, you can see a lot. That for me, that's a long time in in this line of work. For a long time, there has been a big difference between the cost and the time to provision fibre to the premise versus fibre to the node. Regrettably, as they say, Moore's law does not apply to digging holes. So all of that additional civil work is still there. If anything, that gap in terms of dollars and years is getting bigger because, particularly in a country like Australia, labour's gotten more expensive. So, you know, you'd say fibre to the prem is 3 times, 4 times, 5 times more extensive to fibre to the node, depending on where you are. But there is also a service level difference. And so if you think about what you could deliver on ADSL 2+, 5, 6, 7 years ago, say you could deliver 10 megs, 15 megs, and you could deliver 100 up to a gig on fibre to the premise, a very big difference in service level. What has happened in relatively recent times is that difference has compressed. And so now you are seeing the difference in the service level that is available over fibre to the node, fibre to the basement, what you could call generically FTTX technologies, has become much less. And as we all know, there is a point at which increases in speed cease to have any additional or any marginal utility, where the marginal utility goes to zero. You know, if I have 50 megs and that enables me to do everything I want to do, every application, every service, then going to 100 might be nice to talk about to my friends, but it is not going to deliver any additional value. And this is why all of the telco representatives here will know ruefully how hard it is to get people to pay a premium for very high speeds. But this is a really important point, because the Labor Party will say our policy is using old-fashioned technology. That is an outright lie. The technologies we are talking about using, whether it is vectored VDSL or now with the potential to use G.fast, are not old technologies, they are the latest. They are the latest. GPON has been around for a lot longer than them. So we're talking about the cutting edge, not old technology.
You're tempting me actually to jump ahead, because I've got all these questions, but I'll jump ahead to one. Because actually in 2003-4, I can't remember which year, Telstra told a Senate committee, that they all showed up at the Senate committee and said that ADSL and VDSL was an interim technology and that fibre to the premises would be needed in future because, in Telstra's own words, the copper was archaic. Bill Scales, who was a senior Telstra executive at the time, told the committee that for copper it's 5 minutes to midnight, and that was nearly 10 years ago. So
well, he was wrong, wasn't he? So I mean, clearly, I mean, you know, I mean, it's a
now it's 1 minute to midnight.
But you see, look, I'll tell you what my methodology has been. As you know, I'm a very practical person. I'm a business person. I'm not a terribly good politician, but I've spent a lot of time. But well, I'm not. I come from a business background.
You are talking about it as if you're the CEO of the NBN. I mean, you're talking about it as if you are it's a business and you are the boss of the business.
Do you have any doubt that the buck won't stop with me if I'm the minister? I mean, it stopped with Stephen Conroy. It stops with Anthony Albanese. But But listen, let's not get into. I want to focus on the really critical point, rather than playing pathetic debating games with you. The critical point is this. The critical point is this. If you want to know what's going on with broadband, don't waste your time talking to consultants, or let alone academics. Talk to the men and the women that are actually building the networks now. Talk to Michael Galvin, who's building the open reach network in the UK. Talk to the people that are building the fibre to the premises in a very different context in Telefonica in Spain, or in France Telecom, or in Deutsche Telekom, or AT&T, and with their UVerse fibre to the node versus Verizon's FIOS fibre to the premise program. Talk to the people at Rogers Cable in America, how they have cranked DOCSIS up to deliver very, very high speeds. When you talk to those people, you see that the proposition that the copper is at 5 minutes to midnight is simply not true. I mean, these are not stupid people. These are really smart people, and they are getting real value quickly. And you see, here's the thing. Andrew spoke on behalf of IBM here about the real values in productivity from having ubiquitous, very fast broadband. I echo every one of his sentiments. He's absolutely right. But you know something? If there is that big payday between having a ubiquitous broadband, then that means that rapid deployment is an enormous plus. If there is an enormous benefit by everyone getting this service, then there must be an enormous detriment by delaying it for 10 years or 20 years. Now, we've done some calculations about that. I won't bore you with them, but they run into the many, many billions of dollars. So our approach of getting everybody onto very fast broadband by the end of the next parliament is something that has got to have, by parity of reasoning, a huge economic payoff. And that's one of the reasons we're doing it. It is if you could snap your fingers and time was irrelevant and money was irrelevant, if you were Harry Potter or something, and you could say, right, I'll wave my wand and everyone in Australia will have fibre to the premise and it won't cost anything and it'll all happen instantly. Of course you'd do that. But, that's Hogwarts, right? We're in the real world and we've got to grapple with those practical realities. And I think the approach we're taking is the same approach we're canvassing, and we will justify it, as I described, is exactly the same approach that the smartest telcos around the world are taking right now, and that is an undeniable fact. So, maybe they're all idiots, and some guy at a university in Melbourne or some consultant knows more about it than they do, but I don't think so. In the real world, I like to talk to the people who are actually doing the work.
So, Malcolm, if I can just interrupt you.
Sure. Sure.
By definition, if a cost benefit...
I'm warming up. We're having a politics in the pub on cyber security at the Imperial Hotel tonight. So
this is your warm-up.
I've got to get cranked up. Ready for that.
Righto. Well, I'm just going to have to get more active.
Yeah, you just rev up.
I've got to. Got any beers?
More than a few tonight.
Now, by definition, if you haven't done a cost-benefit analysis, you don't know what it says, right?
But we're going to do one. We've got it's in the policy.
No, I understand. You're going to do one. I'm not saying you're not going to do one
from opposition.
No, I understand. So therefore, you don't know what it says, right?
Correct.
So it might say that the fibre to the premises is fine. Now, I say this because I would have thought that you would, in a proper cost-benefit analysis for a national infrastructure project, which the NBN clearly is. It isn't just any old business. This is a significant national infrastructure project. You would bring into...
It is any old money, and it should be treated carefully as though it was a shareholders' funds.
No, but Malcolm, government spend money on all sorts of social things,
and they often misspend it.
Well, sure, but they spend them and spend them well on social outcomes as well.
Yeah.
Of course they do.
Well,
I mean that, if I may say, is a pathetic.
No, it's not. No, it is. It's not pathetic. I mean, it is. Look, the misallocation of resources by the public sector is a problem in every jurisdiction, and look, the private sector makes plenty of misallocation of resources too. But the difficulty is that look. Let me talk about.
Government is not a business, Malcolm. Government is not a business.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean you can just waste money recklessly. You see, what people do...
No, I'm not saying that's true.
No,
but
what you're saying...
Will you, in your cost-benefit analysis, include non-financial benefits?
Of course.
You will?
I didn't come down in the last shower. Let me explain. Look, what you've got to do in a cost-benefit analysis is I'll tell you what the big issues in the cost-benefit analysis are. Firstly, you've got to do the financial analysis. How long is it going to take? How much is it going to cost? And you'll get... Let's assume that our analysis from the outside, which, by the way, no one's challenged any of the assumptions in it, but let's assume we're right and their approach will take, many, many years, cost $94 billion. Our approach will get the job done much sooner and cost $29.5. Let's assume there's that big delta, that big gap, $60 billion or whatever. And then the question is, and this is the very interesting one, are there sufficient external benefits, sufficient externalities from productivity occasioned by people having fibre to the premise, which, let's say, for argument's sake, enables you to have speeds of 100 megs plus, whereas fibre to the node, and we'll just assume, will not allow you to have more than, say 100. So fibre to the node, let's say, with all of the technology that's coming down the track, G.fast, let's assume that it's knocked out at 100 megs, fibre to the prem can go to a gig. Is that differential, bearing in mind we're only talking about residential premises, is that worth $60 billion? And that's the big question.
Well, can I start by saying that I think the 60 billion is rubbish, but I've got
why?
no way of proving.
Okay,
I have no way of proving that because I haven't done a cost-benefit analysis. You've
No.
You've just asserted that. I'm asserting something else.
No. You see, this is where you let yourself down. You shouldn't say things like this in public. Seriously, you've got young impressionable people watching this who hang on your every word. I mean, we've got to the 94 billion by changing 4 parameters in the NBN corporate financial model, right? We said they're not going to be able to increase their ARPU at 9% real every year for 10 years, because there's absolutely no precedent for that in the history of telecommunications, at least in this country. And we've said a healthy 3.5% real. We've said it's going to take them 4 more years to complete it, which I think is very generous. We've said their cost of construction is going to be actually less than what it cost Telstra to do fibre to the premise in South Brisbane, and I think, with the benefit of hindsight now, we're probably again being too generous of them. We've said it's going to be 3,600 rather than 2,400, and we've assumed there'll be more wireless-only premises than they've assumed. I'm waiting for someone. Look, that policy's been out for 4 months. I'm waiting for someone in the analyst community, be they journalists or economists, to say, guys, one or all of those assumptions is wrong. Now that is, I think all of those change parameters I've put to you are very plausible and reasonable. So if they're right, 94 is the figure. So when you appoint your cost-benefit analyst, you'll go, here it is. Off you go. No, you're reverse engineering the cost-benefit analysis. That's what the NBN did. That's what they did.
No, but you're saying the cost is 94. What if it isn't that? I mean,
well, if it isn't that, if it's less, I'll be delighted. I mean, look, I would like to do. You've got to understand this, Alan. If I could be, a magician and ensure that everyone had fibre to the premise instantly, and at no cost or very low cost, you'd do it. So I'm not arguing that fibre to the premises is a bad technology. You've got to remember, we believe in fibre. I mean, our approach replaces most of the fibre. I mean, a typical, I don't know what it is to your house, but a typical environment would be an exchange, a customer's premise. Say that's 4K. Of that 4K, 3.6 kilometres of it is to the pillar in the street. All of that's going to be replaced with fibre. So we're going to replace, whether it's 80 or 90 or 95% of the copper run between the exchange and the customer's premise. The only reason you don't replace the last bit is because that's where the vast majority of the costs are. And so you're weighing up that cost for what you get out of it.
So to be clear, I mean, your objection to the current NBN is not in some sense technical or ideological, it's just financial. You would prefer, if possible,
about that. Yeah.
You would prefer, if possible, to have fibre to the premise.
Well, if money and time were no object, I would certainly do that. That's why we will do it anywhere, any greenfields developments where the cost of pulling fibre optic cable is not materially different from copper, of course you'd do it. Anywhere where there's demand for it, CBDs.
So I'm just saying that you've come up with that position without a cost-benefit analysis. And that cost-benefit analysis should include non-financial benefits.
Yes, it would. It should, and it will.
Which have not been quantified. So you cannot really hold that position with the certainty you do.
No, but of course that has got to be taken into account. But because I'm not arrogant or so convinced of my own wisdom as to believe that that nobody else has anything to learn from, the reality is that every other comparable market, almost without exception, is taking the hybrid technology approach that we've described here. So, one of the interesting things about the NBN and its genesis was that there's no evidence that they actually took that sort of analysis into account. There's no evidence that they noticed what was going on in other jurisdictions, or that they were aware of the developing technology. I mean, this is a business audience, so I think you'll relate to this. The argument that is put against our approach is to say, and by Stephen Conroy used to do this all the time, he'd say it's like building the Harbour Bridge with 2 lanes. Now, the big difference between a telecom network and a bridge is you cannot tack on an extra lane to a bridge every 5 years. I'm sure there's some engineer who'll offer to do it for you, but in practical terms, you can't do it, right? Telecom networks are upgraded all the time. Sometimes you put in new physical channels, new cables. More often, people like Sean O'Halloran's company, Alcatel-Lucent, are selling you smarter electronic kit to put at each end. And so you're upgrading it, or you can upgrade it incrementally. So the arguments put against us, they say, okay, your approach may deal with our demands today and for the next 10 years, say, but what about 20 years or 30 years hence? And this is my answer. I've got 2 answers. One, I say, if you're saying I should invest $5 million today to deal with the demands we think will be around in 30 years' time, rather than $1 million to deal with the foreseeable future, my response is you're inviting me to put $4 million additional into a project on which I will get no return for 10, 20 years' time. But, and if you don't care about the money because it's the government's, and a lot of people don't, here's the second answer. Why would you provision for the demands of 20 or 30 years hence with the technology of today? When you've seen the rapid evolution of this telecommunications technology, when you've seen, you've gone from DSL, ADSL, ADSL2+, VDSL, vectored VDSL, now G.fast, and that's all happened in a few years, why would you imagine that the last gasp of, that technology has ended? It's like you're trying to be a technological Frank Fukuyama, the end of history. I mean, the one thing I know for sure, I don't know what demand will be in 30 years' time. I'm happy to assume it's going to be a lot more. I'm cool about that. But there's a degree of uncertainty about that. The one thing I'm completely certain about is that there will be much better technologies, and I'd rather be provisioning for that demand with the dollars of the future and in the technology of the future. And that is a big part of this. And this goes to a wider issue. It's all about making decisions in times of uncertainty and the value of optionality. You think about it, the value of optionality in an uncertain environment has never been higher. That's why traders like, from your work, Alan, traders like volatility. The options are more valuable in a more volatile environment. And so just in a technology environment where it's changing rapidly, you want to keep your options open and don't lock yourself into investments and technologies that may not get a return for a long time, and you may have better options down the track.
Are you concerned about the issue of inequity, in the sense that some people will have fibre to the node, but if you're in a greenfields, if you happen to buy a new house in a new estate, you're going to have fibre to the home.
Yep.
And so therefore you're going to have faster speeds, clearly, or the potential for faster speeds. You're not going to have to wait for a future communications minister to upgrade you. Is that a concern for you?
No, it isn't, because the real issue is not, at the moment you don't get people rioting because some people have connected to HFC and some people have got ADSL2+. Where you get arguments about inequity at the moment is between people who have got access to very fast broadband that at whatever speed meets their demands and delivers the services and applications they value, and people that don't. So there is inequity right at the moment. For example, if you are living on the end of a pair gain system, you've got no broadband at all for all practical purposes. And so the virtue of our approach is that you get everybody up to speeds that will enable them to do pretty much everything you would want to do conceivably online, in that we're talking about residential areas, which is the bulk of the build, in that residential environment. So I guess the point is, let's say I'm sitting on vectored VDSL and let's say I can get 80 megs, and you're round the corner and you've got a fibre connection and you can get 1 gig. This may make you feel good and it may give you bragging rights, But the big question is, what is it that you at home can do with that I can't do with my service? And it is, you know, you struggle to find examples. You see, the thing that I think a lot of people misunderstand about speed in telecommunications is that it's a complete misnomer, which we're all stuck with. The expression so many megabits per second, so many millions of bits per second, is actually an expression of volume. It's the bit that the signal propagates over the glass or the glass and the wire or network at roughly the same speed, you know, at more or less the speed, well, obviously not more, less, close to the speed of light, okay? So the speed of the propagation of the signal is pretty much the same. It's the amount of data that can arrive simultaneously. So if you think, it's better to think about it as the size of a pipe, and you often hear that metaphor. It's actually a more instructive metaphor. So if I'm in an office, if I'm at the Australian and I've got, you know, 100 journalists, 200 journalists there, all doing, working online, using, say, 10 megs each simultaneously, I need a big pipe. If I'm at home, I don't need a pipe that big. You know, if I have a brewery or a dairy, I need a big connection to Sydney Water for my water supply. If I'm at home, I don't. And again, it's important to bear in mind the relationship between the size of the pipe and the volume of data you use. Alan may have a 1 gig connection, I may have a 100 meg connection, or 25 meg connection. I may download more gigabytes a month than him because I spend all my time downloading movies and, you know, watching Fetch TV that Scott's company is delivering, and so I'm online all the time. Alan may not be online so much. So he might only use 50 gigs a month, I might use 500. So it's a bit like water. If all of us decided to have 3 one-hour showers a day, Sydney Water would have to build another dam or something like that, but they'd sell a lot more water, but the size of the pipe into your house wouldn't necessarily need to be any bigger. It's just that it would be on for longer. And that's a very important point.
Malcolm, that's all very well, and that's obviously true. However, the thing is that this is going to be by government decree. You, as minister, are going to decree that that person there is going to get a big pipe, that person there is going to get a little pipe. And in fact, I mean, it's a bit unclear from your policy, but I think that there's a provision, or you're vaguely hinting at that if there's parts of the copper network that aren't up to scratch, that can't be used because it's degraded in some way, you will build fibre in that area, right?
Well, what you do is you look at your instructions to the NBN Co will say nobody is to have less than 25 megs. So that's the design parameter.
Right.
And so what that means is that if you have got a part of your D-side copper network that is very degraded, and let's say there's been a whole history of maintenance problems because of water and so forth, you might remediate it, or you might say, look, this run here is costing too much, we'll just put fibre in there. And so you make a site-specific decision. The interesting feedback we've had, again from the people that run these networks, is that the maintenance cost differential between outdoor copper plant and outdoor fibre plant is either non-existent or very modest. The experience in the UK has been, to date, there's no difference. In the United States, where they've had a lot more experience, AT&T particularly has had a lot more experience, their figure is that the maintenance cost for outdoor copper plants, which is, say, fibre to the node, is about average $3 per connected household per month, and the cost of their fibre to the premise households is around half that, you know, and so $20 a year. I mean, it's not a big item.
I'm really talking about the fact that, you know, when Bill Scull said it's 5 minutes to midnight on the copper network, that didn't apply to obviously the whole network. Some of the network is in better shape than others.
And you've got to remember, we are replacing most. See, if you think about the design of a fibre to the node layout, Alan, and again, we're spending too much time talking about engineering, but it is exactly the same as fibre to the premise until you get to the node. The kit in the exchange or the point of interconnection is the same. The fibre that goes out to the street corner is the same. It's just that at the street corner you have a powered electronic device which hooks into that last bit of copper. So most of the copper is being replaced or overbuilt.
So it's not really, I mean, just to go back to what you just said, it isn't what you're promising is not really a fibre to the node network. It's a minimum 25 megabits a second network, however delivered. Is that a reasonable characterisation?
No, it is a national broadband network that will deliver very high speeds to everyone, which will deploy
25 megabits a second. That's what you said.
Well, that is the floor. I mean, the vast majority of people in the fibre to the node areas will have 50 megs or better. I mean, you can, if you look at, there's a good table or graph from Alcatel that we've reproduced on our website in the FAQ section, which shows the speeds that are available at certain distances. The only reason I've set 25 megs is that if you were doing it in a commercial sense, for example, and you had someone that was... hang on, just let me finish. You had someone that was, say, 4 kilometre copper run from the node, a commercial telco might say, bad luck, buddy, you know, you're going to get a couple of megs. Because we've set that floor, that means that the NBN co will have to build a fibre extension module or do something to make sure that no one falls below that.
Yeah, no, I don't think it matters why you've said 25. It's just that's what you've said. That's it. And it really is a question of it doesn't matter how it's delivered. That's what you're going to do.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the wireline technology, whether it's fibre to the prem, fibre to the basement, fibre to the street corner, as it were, is not relevant.
One of the reasons that you're pushing your proposal is that it'll be faster to complete, faster to build. You'll get there more quickly. There are two reasons why the NBN company has been delayed. One was the negotiations with Telstra took 2 years, and second was some of their subcontractors weren't up to scratch. They didn't have enough fibre splicers. They just didn't have sufficient capacity in Australia to do it in the time that was required. Now, you're also going to have to negotiate with Telstra. You're going to have to start again, basically. You're going to have to negotiate a whole new thing with Telstra, and you're going to have the same contractors and subcontractors doing the work. So why would you think it's going to be quicker? I mean, you could be stuck with Telstra. People could be hanging on with NBN doing nothing for another 2 years while you negotiate your new deal with Telstra.
Well, that won't happen. I mean, the current...
But you can't be sure of that. I mean, that's certainly what Conroy and Mike Quigley said we'll be fine with Telstra, won't take very long at all. And of course it didn't, it took 2 years. You let me know when you've stopped. Let me know when you've stopped and I'll answer the question.
No, I mean it, seriously, because I started answering, then you talked over the top of me. So, I'm serious, but can I answer the question now? Is that all right?
Yes.
Okay, good. The reason I'm very optimistic is that the changes to the definitive agreements are relatively modest. They simply require us, in practical terms, to get access to the D-side copper. Everything else is nothing else changes, and nothing else needs to change anyway. So I'm very optimistic about that. As far as the contracting side of it, Alan, the assumptions in the NBN Co business plan about the number of premises they can pass has been proved to be really over optimistic, and that 2021 finish date is seen to be a bit of a fantasy. I mean, they've got their peak rate of passing premises is I think 6,800 a day, which is laughable. It's so over the top. And clearly what happened was Conroy set 2021 as the end date, and then they back-solved that by punching in whatever assumptions they needed to get there. Now, the advantage of fibre to the node is that there is so much less civil work. And to give you, because the ducts, that's to say the pipes between the exchanges and the distribution points are much bigger and there's more of them. Pulling the fibre through them is pretty straightforward, and you are not, other than for remediation, disturbing the copper between the node and the customer's premises. So it's much quicker. Again, an example, in the UK, British Telecom's Openreach has passed and is able to connect with fibre to the node about 19 million premises in 3.5 years. So that is, and these deployments are very fast. That's why telcos are doing them. I mean, the speed is a very big part of it.
That thing about Telstra was, I think, the main reason I wrote that you need to dump your policy, which obviously you've failed to do.
No one's perfect.
But the negotiation with Telstra, I mean, they are in a pretty strong position, wouldn't you say? You've gone to an election, you've won an election with a policy, you're committed, right? They are in a strong... You'd like to be in that sort of negotiating position, wouldn't you, in your investment banking days?
Yeah, I guess so. My impression is that Telstra wants to keep its shareholders whole. We've said that is our goal too. They want to get the NBN Co built. That's our goal too. The sooner it is built, the better it is for them. The PSAA payments that accrue to Telstra as premises are cut over to the NBN obviously would be they wouldn't be increased in dollar value, but they'd be accelerated in terms of delivery in our approach. So in that sense, from an NPV point of view, it would be somewhat better. And look, the analyst community, who, they're like the betting market. I mean, sometimes they get it wrong. Generally they don't. The analyst community have generally come to the conclusion that the coalition's NBN policy is somewhere between neutral and a net positive for Telstra. Not a huge positive, but so I think I'm very confident we can get something sorted out. But I'm not, as you know, I'm not unfamiliar with negotiations, including with Telstra for that matter. So I'm not being unrealistic about this.
And speaking of Telstra, could you tell us how it will still be structurally separated if it's also running its HFC cable as an infrastructure asset, as you foreshadow in your policy? You've I think foreshadowed both things: structural separation, and that Telstra will be able to compete with the NBN using its HFC network, presumably while also being a retailer. So will you insist on the HFC business being fully separated from Telstra?
Our assumption is that we will. Our assumption is that nothing changes. In the model, the policy, we've assumed that nothing changes with respect to the HFC other than that we would not overbuild the HFC as a priority. A key part of our policy is we will upgrade broadband services, be it fibre to the premise or fibre to the node, in those areas with the greatest need and or the greatest demand. So which is generally the same. So the HFC areas where people can get 100 megs, you wouldn't be overbuilding them with either technology, in the next 3 years. I am deeply troubled by the idea that the NBN Co and the government has paid Telstra, and Optus for that matter, a lot of money to decommission their HFC networks, which are delivering and are capable of delivering very high-speed broadband. Everywhere else in the world, it has been, and it wasn't until recently in Australia, an object of government policy that there should be, wherever possible, facilities-based competition. And typically, in most developed markets, the broadband wireline competition is between the telco, which has either generally gone to fibre to the node, and a cable company, which has, because of the DOCSIS and other, the DOCSIS technology has been able to deliver broadband data over its HFC network, which of course, as we all know, is built for delivering pay TV. So I would like there to be facilities competition, but we haven't. I don't think Telstra has worked out what it wants to do quite yet, and so we have.
No, but
we've parked that.
If you worked out what you want to do, I mean, do you want? I mean, you've said structural separation. Does that mean you will insist that Telstra demerge the HFC network into a separate company? It must. Well, it must mean that.
Yeah, that structural separation does mean that. I think that the you've got to remember that the NBN Co is committed to paying Telstra a lot of money. NBN Co has effectively bought both the HFC and the copper, and the traditional copper. So there's all sorts of options. I mean, one option could be that the HFC becomes part of the NBN Co network. I know there's a...
Oh, so that is an option for you?
Well, so why not? Why wouldn't it be? I mean, if that you're paying for it.
But then it becomes a monopoly. There isn't facilities-based competition. That's what you're in favour of.
That is another angle. That is another aspect. I agree. It's not. I'm saying to you, there's no. The HFC is, and we've been very clear about this. We've been very clear that we're open to looking at different solutions there. One possibility is that it is operated by Telstra as a wholesale asset, so then you would have a qualification to the structural separation objective. But again, I'm uncomfortable with that. But there are a number of options there, and of course, one option is we just continue with Plan A. But I think that
well, there's discomfort all round, isn't there? I mean,
there is. That's
the problem.
No, well, that's the problem. It's not the only problem. There are plenty of problems.
Okay, it's a problem.
But I'm just saying it is. There's got to be a better solution, it seems to me, than paying Telstra billions of dollars to switch off an HFC network that is capable of delivering very high-speed broadband now and into the future. There is, this is on one level that is an extraordinary, episode of asset destruction. So there's got to be, there's a number of different ways you can address it. I've got a very clear view about what Telstra wants to achieve and what we want to achieve in respect of the traditional copper, if you like, of the telephone lines that are being used for DSL, etc. With the HFC, there's a degree of, there's more talking to be done. But it's not a near-term problem because it's not going to be a near-term priority for overbuilding. I mean, I'm on... where we live, we've got HFC, we've got 100 meg service. I don't, regard myself or my neighbours as being, high target priorities for the NBN to overbuild. I'm sure, there are plenty of people that have got dreadful broadband or no broadband that should be our targets.
Yeah. So, but can you see that perhaps if maybe it's the problem? I don't know. But at the moment, the NBN that we've got is expensive. It's slow. It's all those things that you've described. However, everyone knows what's going on. It's quite clear what's happening. It's certain this is going to be built. There's a certain percentage of the nation going to be covered by fibre. Then there's going to be X amount of satellite. If you win the election, nobody knows what's going to happen. Anything could happen.
Well, that's not quite true. I mean, there will be a national broadband network in which everyone will have access to very fast broadband. You say that things are certain with the current NBN. I would say this to you, Alan. There are a couple of things that are uncertain. You don't know how long it's going to take. It could take 20 plus years. You don't know how much it's really going to cost. It could cost $100 billion or more. You don't know, and they don't know, how to connect customers in multi-dwelling units, apartment buildings, office buildings. I mean, I'll give you an example. In South Perth, the NBN has said it has passed 1,000 premises. Fantastic. Do you know how many are capable of getting a connection if they want one? 87. They have passed all of the premises, all of the buildings in the Townsville CBD. Chamber of Commerce there tells me that there's a number of them that can get a connection. It's 4%. 96% cannot get a connection if they want one because they haven't worked out how to get the service into multi-occupier buildings, office buildings or apartment buildings. So to say that the NBN Co offers a degree of certainty, it doesn't. I'm canvassing, proposing technologies that will work. Our approach will connect multi-dwelling units. You know something? It is so straightforward. You don't have to drill holes in people's walls. You don't have to fight up through the risers. The fibre comes down the street, you install a node, in the basement or the telecom room of the building, you hook it into the copper LAN in the building, and away you go. And the person who's living there who just wants a telephone, nothing changes in that apartment. The young family that want masses of high-definition video and gaming and all that stuff, they get a screamingly fast connection. But there's nothing, you know, it is so much simpler, which is why that is what is being done just about everywhere in the world. I mean, you know, in Korea, I mean, here's how crazy the politics of the NBN is. The company has gone to the government and said, we should do VDSL in multi-dwelling units in apartment buildings. The government knocked it back because they want to be able to say, as a matter of a political promise, every premises, whether it is a cottage in the suburbs or, you know, one-bedroom unit in King's Cross, will get fibre to the premise. They wanted to have that promise. Do you know in Korea, brand new apartment buildings, which I've inspected, I've been there in my own eyes, these amazing towers, brand new towers are cabled, the interior of the local area network in the building is Category 5 copper. They don't even run fibre optic cables into new apartments there. Now, I'm sure there are some that they have, but you know, it's very interesting. The approach we're taking is very much the global norm. And you know, I think that's sensible when you're dealing with public money.
I think it's your turn now. I think we have some time for questions from the audience. And do we have some roving mics? Let's mobilise the mics. And table 5 at the back of table 5, if we could just come here to begin with. Let's get going. If you could identify yourself before you ask your question, everybody.
Yeah, sorry, Paul Lewis. I sit on half a dozen boards. Malcolm knows me from Magellan. So, really, a couple of comments. We actually had a lunch yesterday for the Australia-British Chamber where Sir Rod Eddington was talking about infrastructure. And let me start by saying that by far the most questions were on the subject of the NBN, and the entire table conversation at lunch was about the NBN. So I think you're absolutely spot on the right subject. Secondly, in a slightly previous life, I spent 7 years on British Telecom's Global Advisory Board. And if I could make one comment that's relevant to that, I don't understand the technology, but I did understand that BT were extraordinarily good at adopting and adapting new technologies as they came along and working them into existing networks. And I have to say, to support Malcolm's proposition of what they would like to do is very much aligned to what BT is very successfully doing in the UK. And I've been out of that role for 5 years now, so I'm a bit out of that. If there are two thoughts or questions, and perhaps one of them's a bit light-hearted, so apologies for that. I found it quite extraordinary that the NBN would go and seek basically political lobbyists to go and sort of lobby their case on board structures going forward. So I don't know, Malcolm, whether you care to talk about that, but for a government agency to go and hire political lobbyists, I found that rather extraordinary.
Yeah, it's certainly unprecedented.
And the second...
You can't say the NBN isn't innovative.
And the second thing you might or might not like to comment, part of the conversation yesterday over lunch, it was said that mobile network capacity is actually starting to exceed what is potentially deliverable across the NBN. So are you aware of that? Are you able to comment on that?
Well, the amount of traffic on all networks is growing very rapidly. You know, the thing about, and there are many people in this room that are much more knowledgeable about wireless networks and their capacity than me, but I think the short point is that a given wireless base station will have a certain amount of capacity. It is like a fixed pipe. And the technologies for deploying that, using that bandwidth, those frequencies, is getting a lot better. So you can get more into the pipe. And of course you can build more base stations, which is what everyone is doing. So you can have more pipes, but at the end of the day there are capacity constraints. So to deliver a guaranteed level of service over what we would call mobile wireless networks is pretty hard, particularly if you're talking about video services. So that's why wireless operators are trying to get their traffic into fibre as quickly as possible, you know, to get it out of the air, into fibre, while they're deploying Wi-Fi hotspots so that they relieve the pressure on the licensed spectrum. There are some interesting developments which we have not, we've canvassed them in a footnote or en passant in our policy, but we haven't modelled it because it's not yet commercially deployed enough. I mean, our policy is a very conservative. I didn't want to propose anything we couldn't deliver. Okay, but there is a lot of work being done on what are called metro cells or pico cells. You see them used in football stadiums now. Alcatel's got a very strong presence in that area, and the thought is you have one of the, say, some people have canvassed, what if you had one of these little base stations at every second street light, and that in effect did that, that link into the house. Now, that's an emerging technology.
I wrote that in a column, and everyone held me down, said I was a complete idiot.
Yeah, well.
Which is not the first time that's happened to me.
Well, it's they were wrong. It's you've got it. I reckon the scarcest.
Don't you think I'm an idiot?
No, I don't. I don't think you're an idiot. I think the most important thing in this area is not the technology, but the technological imagination. And you cannot have technological imagination unless you have got a very, very open mind. And that means that if somebody comes up with something new that sounds a bit outlandish, don't say, oh, that's rubbish, not invented here, it isn't in our playbook, we've never heard of it before. That's why you've got to be relentlessly curious and open-minded. And I, even though I'm not in the first bloom of youth, I always try to, you can't stop yourself getting older chronologically, physically, but you've just got to stop yourself thinking in an old way. You've got to always think young. Train yourself to look at the world with a fresh eye every day. And it is so important in technology because preconceptions, received wisdom is very often wrong. This is one of the reasons, I'll give you a theory, one of the reasons why I think, people always say, why are the Israelis so innovative? And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. But I think one of them is because their society is relentlessly, abrasively non-deferential. And I think that deference is a real challenge to innovation. And this is the problem that leaders have got in companies. You've got to encourage people to be, without being rude, because you've got to be civil, but you want to encourage people to challenge all the received wisdoms. And, we've had all this debate about Fairfax and so forth in this week. I mean, there's plenty of lessons to be learnt. Open minds are vital. Anyway.
I'm going to be like a laughing clown and move my head around. So is there anything over this side of the room? There's one.
Hi Malcolm, Justin Diddams from Citi. It strikes me that you keep referring to corporates globally, like BT and Verizon and Rogers building all these networks. And I wondered if there was maybe a more radical option that you might actually just get the incumbent telco that has all the infrastructure to build this big grand plan, and what might step in the way, of you actually getting that achieved? Because I wondered how many governments around the world are rebuilding monopoly infrastructure.
Zero.
Well, there you go. So zero.
Yeah.
So the government's rebuilding a monopoly. So I wondered if a radical rethink of getting the guy that has all the know-how and all the infrastructure just to build this for you and maybe subsidise it in non-dense areas and take a slightly more pragmatic approach, a bit more of a
even more pragmatic.
That's an analysis that's so rational and sensible it could never get any traction. If you want to see, I reckon, the two best examples of getting national broadband upgraded, and in one in which there's a lot of fibre to the premise being built, Britain and New Zealand, and in both places the government required the incumbent telco, BT in one and Telecom New Zealand in the other, to separate their customer access network business. In Britain they did a functional separation into a company called Openreach, which runs as a separate division. In New Zealand, as you know, they did the full Monty and they spun it out into a separate company, Chorus, which is a separate listed company. you know, if you could wind the clock back, and you know, obviously Telstra would have to play ball, and I suspect this is all fantasy football now, but the smartest deal would have been to persuade Telstra to split its customer access network into a separate business, just like Telecom New Zealand did. Then you would have all of the years of corporate knowledge and expertise. You'd actually have it run by people that knew what they were doing. And you're dead right. And then you say, okay, we want you to upgrade everyone's broadband. We know that a lot of it's not commercial, so let's have an arm wrestle about the level of the subsidy. See, the great thing about that is the government knows what it's in for, how much it's up for. The problem with the NBN Co, it is a blank cheque. I mean, you know, there is no budget on the NBN Co. The government says their peak funding requirement is going to be 44 billion. That's a guess. They don't know what it's going to be. So the only way... So you're dead right, but I suspect...
So are you going to have a crack at that then?
I think... well, Alan, yeah, and
Justin.
Justin, I think that is... I think in practical terms, that is too hard. But if you could achieve that, that would be a very sensible outcome. You couldn't just turn around and say, we're going to abandon structural separation. I mean, that is our policy. That's in the legislation. I've always thought, when I was a banker like you years ago, I actually went to Telstra eons ago. I think it might have been last century, in fact, and said to them that it was in their... I always thought it was in Telstra's financial interest to split its customer access network business into a separate utility, because then they would cease spending so much time beating up with the regulators and the government, and the rest of their business would get a multiple uplift. They'd get a higher rating because they'd be seen as more of a growth stock and so forth. Anyway, they haven't done it. So I've been, you know, getting back to what I said to our friend from BT earlier, I've been very careful that we don't promise anything in our policy that we cannot actually deliver. So, but you're dead right. In an ideal world, you'd have structural separation achieved that way. I think the New Zealanders have by far. I think they've got a fantastic model. What they've done, of course.
You could actually sell NBN Co to Telstra, couldn't you? That is a possibility.
Well, there's a lot of legislative problems, but I mean, again, and I mean, Telstra has got no interest in doing this, so it takes two to tango. But if you had a chorus, if you had the equivalent of chorus done in Australia, so you had a separate company that was structurally separated, you know, separate business, that was the wholesale network business, like Chorus is in New Zealand. Would it be better that that company ran a national broadband network rather than the government? Well, of course it would. I mean, everyone would be in favour of that. I mean, this is I think the issue, the problem has, I mean, there may be some people on the Labor Party that think it's a great idea that the government recreates the old PMG, but I think the concern about Telstra has been not that the network belonged to a private company, but that it belonged to a big retailer. So if you could achieve structural separation along the New Zealand lines, that would be a great outcome. But again, I don't see. I think that is probably a bridge too far. That's a, you know, in the world, politics is the art of the possible. I think that may well be an opportunity that was missed.
Anyone over this side? Gentleman there.
Philip Wood of Compass Resources. First of all, congratulations to you both on conducting a splendid discussion. I want to sort of go back, not on a technical level, but if you like on a kind of social observational level, to the earlier question about mobile or wireless broadband. Anecdotally, you see people everywhere now in our society using their iPhones or their laptops or their iPads or whatever, whether it's on buses and trains or in airports or in hotels, moving around constantly, particularly youth. Kevin Rudd's the ultimate exponent of this. Now,
what, of youth or social media?
No further comment. But surely, I mean, if you look at the Chinese, for example, they have virtually leapfrogged landlines in favour of utilisation of mobile phones. They virtually don't use it. Lots and lots of people nowadays don't actually have the traditional home phone. They just use their mobile. When they go into the office, they use it. When they're on the bus, they use it. And when they're at home, they use it. Now, surely the speed of broadband is one thing, and that's fine, and that's very technical. But surely there's also the question of social usage. And most people want to be able to have the same broadband account, whether they're at home or travelling, and wherever they happen to be. And surely they're prepared to put up with, if you like, lower speeds in order to enjoy mobility. Now, the whole problem with the NBN is all it's doing is delivering a high speed to the home, but the home alone. And if you want to have broadband usage mobile when you travel and move around, the NBN is of no use to you.
So what's the question?
So the question is, why isn't the national broadband network focusing on wireless broadband rather than on landline broadband?
Well, firstly, it's a good question, but I mean the answer is it's never designed to deal with that. There is a competitive wireless industry in Australia, with Telstra, Optus, and Vodafone, and so you couldn't say there's been a market failure that required the government to be buying into it. I'm not sure the government. Well, I'm quite sure the government shouldn't have been getting into the fixed line business either. But I think in terms of offering a broadband account that has got both wireless and fixed in it, the telcos will bundle all those anyway, and they're doing it now. And you won't have an account with the NBN Co as a consumer. Don't undersell the importance of fixed line though. Very high capacity broadband services are very important. The value of fibre to the home has been oversold dramatically, but the value of fibre for business, for institutions, anywhere where there's a lot of people using the internet, is very considerable. So again, it's the Labor Party and some people in the Twitter sphere try to present this as a fibre versus copper debate. I mean, it really isn't. It's about, we should have a debate about, or the policy should have been all about a service level. What are we trying to enable everyone to be able to do? And surely that is to be able to access all of the applications and services that are of value to them in the digital world, and to be able to do so from as many platforms as possible, including the very convenient mobile platforms that wireless offers. So,
my watch is just a little bit slow, which means that we've got time for one more quick question and quick answer. So, anyone?
That's it.
No? Oh, well, there you go. That's done.
There he is.
What is it?
Jamie Leishman from ABB.
Jamie Leishman from ABB. Yep. Quickly.
There you go.
I'd just like to say that me and 20 million other people are going to have our shrubberies upset and our rockeries upset, and that's all got to be put back and made good, all for the sake of a bit of extra bandwidth. And I'm quite happy to sit with 100 and run it through the copper and not have to have that cost.
Might be 100, mate.
Well, I think
25 is even okay.
Yeah.
I mean, for a home of two, man and wife, 3 kids and a dog, there's not the concentration that really needs much more.
Yeah, I've published our dogs' blogs for years, and they are not high bandwidth users, I have to say. They have argued for fibre to the bone, but purely as a means of discovery.
On that note, I think we can hand it over to Nicholas Gray.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you agree that was a very enjoyable and spirited exchange, and I would like to thank firstly Andrew Stevens and IBM for their support of this event and their ongoing support of the Australian and Business Spectator, and this is the launch of a very exciting 6-month partnership with IBM for both of our publications. So thank you, Andrew, and the team from IBM. And thank you to Alan and Malcolm for their spirited engagement on this matter, both in our pages over the last year and today. I think there are a lot of things that were shared that resonated, particularly for me, Malcolm's comment about, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm sure here, but technology only being limited by imagination. Business Spectator will carry a webcast of this debate available from an hour's time, so if anyone wants to go back and experience it again, it will be available on our site. But for now, please join me in thanking our combatants, Alan Kohler and Malcolm Turnbull. And thank you to all of you for attending today. Good day.